Hola, Brujis. Welcome to a very special episode of Tea, Talk, and Tarot. This episode is a little different. There's no Brujis roundtable, no readings, just you, us, and the spirits that linger between worlds.
We're sharing your stories, real chilling tales sent in by our listeners, our brujis, about the unexplainable, the eerie, and the energies that never quite left. Thank you to everyone who submitted a story and opened the door to their mysteries and memories. So grab your tea, light your candle, and settle in, because this time the veil is thin.
This spooky story is called The Knock Upstairs and was submitted by Brujis Jasmine. My sister and I share an apartment on the second floor of my parents' house. Even though it's our own space, it still feels like one big family home. We're always going up and down the stairs, so hearing each other's footsteps is nothing unusual. It was one of those quiet evenings when the house felt still. While I was taking a shower, I clearly heard someone enter the apartment. The door opened, footsteps followed, and then I heard my sister's voice call, "Jasmine?" Just the way she always says it. I didn't think much of it and went on with my shower. I figured my sister went back downstairs. I clearly heard the door. I clearly heard the footsteps. As I finished getting ready, I headed downstairs to confirm if my sister indeed had gone upstairs. But when I asked her, she looked confused and said she hadn't been upstairs at all. I asked again, thinking she was pulling my leg, but when I saw how serious she was, I began to get creeped out. This wasn't the first strange thing to happen in the house. When my mom discovered what happened, she told us she heard a knock on her bedroom door the night before, but when she opened it, no one was there. My sister, who gets scared easily, decided to sage the house. She opened all the windows as she went from room to room and told every spirit that whatever they were seeking wasn't in our home. After that, we didn't hear anything for a while.
This next story is from our very own Jax, called La Visita, The Visit. When I was growing up, there was an older woman who lived across from my apartment. Everyone called her Abuela, and though she wasn't related to me by blood, she felt like my real grandmother. She took care of me when I was sick, played games with me, and even taught me ballet, though really it was just the two of us spinning and laughing in her small living room. As the years passed, she grew older, and eventually her family decided it was time for her to move away. Not long after, my own family moved too, to a different house across town. In our new home, I was always the last one awake. My parents and siblings left early for work and school, and I would sleep in until the house was silent. One morning, I opened my eyes and looked down the hallway from my bed. Someone was walking towards the bathroom. At first, I thought it was my mom. She was wearing what looked like a bata de dormir, a long nightgown, but as she passed by, I froze. The figure had white curly hair, just like Abuela. Ma? Mama, ¿estás ahí? I called out. No answer. The hallway was quiet. I tried to convince myself that I was half dreaming, but my heart wouldn't stop racing. Finally, I got up to check. Every room was empty. Everyone was gone. Later that day, my mom got a phone call. Abuela had passed away that morning. To this day, I like to think she came by one last time, not to scare me, but to say goodbye. The following spooky story is called The Thing at the Foot of the Bed, submitted by Alex.
So this story happened when I was probably 13, 14 years old. I remember being in high school, and the apartment in my parents' building downstairs was vacant, and so me and my sister moved down there for a while, and we thought we were really cool, sort of living in our own little apartment. And the room was pretty big, and I was excited about being on my own, sort of say. And one night I was going to bed, and I remember pulling the covers, cover myself up. And at some point, I don't remember being asleep. I remember being awake. And I look at the foot of the bed, and there's this little green head, like face. And it looked, I don't know, like almost cartoonish. It looked like it was smiling at me, teeth and all, and the eyes were like excited but mischievous looking. And I remember it just freaking me the heck out and just pulling the covers over my head. And then when I pulled the covers back down, it was just gone. And I just remember just being really freaked out about the whole thing. I looked around the room, there was absolutely nothing. I knew that I wasn't asleep, I knew that I was wide awake. And that story just has always stuck to me. And needless to say, I moved back up to the apartment with my parents soon afterwards. But yeah, it was kind of creepy.
The following stories take place in this listener's grandma's house in Mexico. And honestly, whose abuela's house isn't haunted? The energy has always been different. It's a house full of love, memories, and a lot of unexplained things. Here are just a few of them. Story 1. My grandpa's visit. The first story goes back to when my mom was 8 years old. Tragically, my grandpa passed away that year. The official story was that he had been drinking, had an accident, and was hit by a train. But the unofficial story, the one whispered in the family, is that he was murdered, and they made it look like an accident. After he passed, my grandma said she felt a strange energy in the house. One night, while lying in bed, alone, she felt someone sit at the foot of the bed. You know that feeling when the mattress dips and you can sense another presence? That's exactly what she felt. She said she wasn't exactly scared, but she felt uneasy. At first she thought maybe it was one of her kids. My mom was 8 at that moment, and her oldest was maybe 14. But when she looked, she saw a silhouette of a grown man. Right away, she knew it was her husband. She didn't say anything, just lay there, frozen, hoping he'd go away. But it kept happening, night after night after night. Finally, one night she decided she wanted him to rest. She told me she could feel he was filled with regret and sadness, maybe because of the pain his drinking had caused, and because he'd left behind his wife and 9 children to fend for themselves. That night she spoke out loud and said, "You don't have to worry about us anymore. We're going to be fine. You can rest now. You can go in peace." After that night, he never appeared again. She said he never spoke, never looked at her. He just sat there, staring ahead, tired. But once she said those words, the visits stopped. Story 2. Mystery Man on the Couch. My grandma spent most of her later years living with us here in Illinois. She'd only go back to her house in Mexico for a month or 2 each year. So most of the time, the house was empty. My tia and my cousins would go occasionally to clean it, but never alone. They always said the house had a weird, heavy energy. One day, my cousin, who was about 10 years old, went inside to grab some tools. The doors and windows were all locked. It's a small rancho. Everybody knows everybody, and robberies basically don't happen there. He went inside expecting an empty house, but as he walked inside, he saw a man sitting on the couch. He said every hair on his body stood up. He screamed and ran out the house, yelling for my uncle, "There's someone inside!" My uncle ran in right away, thinking someone had broken in, but when they searched the entire house, no one was there. Every door and window was still locked, except for the one my cousin had used. When my cousin described the man, my uncle said it sounded familiar, so they showed him a picture of my grandpa's grandpa, a photo that wasn't even up in the house. And my cousin said, "That's him. That's who I saw sitting on the couch." Everyone just looked at each other in silence. Story 3. The Gentle Goodbye. Sometimes family members would stay a few nights in the house. Once, my cousin and his wife stayed there. She was pregnant at the time. Sadly, she had a miscarriage during that stay. That night after it happened, she said she felt something soft touch her cheek. It felt like a small, warm hand, gentle, comforting. She said it felt like the baby was saying goodbye, and after that night, she never felt it again. Story 4. The Footsteps in the Middle of the Night. We were visiting my grandma's house. I was sharing a bed with my brother, and my parents were in another bed in the same room. My mom told me she woke up in the middle of the night because she heard the back door open. Then she heard footsteps going into the kitchen. No lights, just steps in the dark. Then the sound of water being poured into a glass. Someone was drinking, setting the glass down, and walking out the back door again. She told my dad to go check, but he said, "Nope, I'm not going out there." The next morning, she asked my brother and me if we'd gotten up during the night. We both said no. We were too scared to even leave the bed at night in that house. Nobody else was there. All the doors were locked. And I'll say this. Every time I've stayed at my grandma's house, I've been terrified at night. I won't go to the bathroom alone. I'll make whoever's with me go too. The house just feels heavy. It's like it's alive. When my grandma passed away about 4 years ago, it was strange. Even though she'd lived most of her time here in Illinois, her house in Mexico started to deteriorate almost immediately, like it knew she was gone. Story 5. The Visit of the Gray Men. I started getting sleep paralysis when I was around 7 or 8 years old. I remember being in my parents' bed, hearing them talk to me, but I couldn't move, speak, or even blink. That was the first time. Over the years, things got worse. One night, when I had my own room, my bed faced a door, and next to the door was my dresser with a mirror. I woke up in the middle of the night, completely frozen. I couldn't move, I couldn't talk, just laid there, wide awake. Then the door slowly opened, and I saw them. 3 or 4 figures came into the room and surrounded my bed. They were gray, about average height, maybe 5'7", 5'8", with slightly larger eyes. They looked more human than alien, but still not right. One of them, the one standing next to my shoulder, leaned down slowly until its face was inches from mine. I couldn't move or close my eyes. I was screaming inside, begging to wake up. After what felt like forever, I managed to wiggle my fingers, then my hands, and when I could finally move again, they were gone. Another time, I had sleep paralysis while laying on the couch. I was on my side, facing the living room, and behind the couch was a dining room. I couldn't move, but I could feel something behind me, like a shadow standing there, watching. Eventually, I broke out of it. I turned around, nothing. Most of these experiences happened at my parents' house. Once I moved out, they became more rare. But every time I visit, that uneasy feeling comes back. Story 6. The Dream and Flying UFOs. The last time I stayed at my parents' house, I had a dream. In it, my grandma, who had already passed away, woke me up and told me to look outside. When I looked out the window, I saw the night sky filled with glowing UFOs dancing and moving above the backyard. I don't know what it is about that house or the energy in it. Something about that place has always felt different.
This spooky story is called The One Who Called My Name and was submitted by Brujis Michelle. Growing up Mexican, I was no stranger to the paranormal. The house I grew up in was haunted, and it was normal for objects to move around on their own. Always hearing someone calling your name in an empty house and frequently lighting up white candles to help a passing spirit cross over. However, one of my earliest experiences happened when I was about 11 or 12 years old. My sister and I shared a bedroom that was right across from my parents' room. One night, my sister woke up sick, and I had to go get my mom. We didn't have much of a hallway since the rooms were so close, but you did walk past a doorway where you could easily see the living room area. This doorway was also directly next to the entrance to my bedroom. After I got my mom and we were walking back to my room, I looked past the doorway to the living room. There I saw what looked like a transparent, glowing figure that resembled my sister sitting on the living room couch, calling me over to her. Immediately, something didn't feel right, as I felt my stomach drop, and what scared me even more is that I saw my actual sister in bed while my mom checked on her. I quickly ran into my room and pulled the covers over me. I still think about what that entity was and why it tried to lure me by looking and sounding like my sister. Who knows what would have happened if I went towards it that night. This spooky story is called The Knock in the Attic and was also submitted by Brujis Michelle. When I was a teenager, my parents finished the attic in their house and made an extra room, which was very much isolated from everyone. You had to go up a lot of stairs, which were towards the back of the house, and walk across the living room space to get to my room, towards the front of the house. I decided I wanted my own space and moved into that room so I didn't have to share with my sister. One evening, I was talking late at night with a friend when suddenly I heard a loud knock on my door. I froze. The knock was loud enough for my friend to hear over the phone, and even they asked who it was since it was so late. I felt too scared to open the door and ask who it was. For whatever reason, my instinct was to look at the bottom of the doorway, and I did not see any light coming from underneath it. With all those stairs and the walk across to get to my room, it was strange someone would do that in the dark. I knew I had a light switch right outside my bedroom door, and I took a few minutes to get the courage to quickly open the door and flip the switch on. Sure enough, the area was dark and no one was there. I locked myself in my room, too terrified to go downstairs, and had my friend stay on the phone with me until I fell asleep. The next morning, I asked my mom if she went up to my room around midnight, and she said, "No, why?" I felt this chill down my spine and just replied, "No reason," and I never slept in the attic again. To this day, we've had visiting families stay, and each one has reported something strange. From hearing voices asking them to stay there, unplugged lamps turning on and off throughout the night, to feeling someone play with their hair. Most who stay there once usually don't want to stay there again. This spooky story is called Something in the Woods, submitted by Glenn.
I don't believe in ghosts. I've never seen a ghost, but the closest thing I have to an experience with paranormal activity was one time when I was on a road trip with my parents. I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and we used to drive down every summer to Florida for vacation. And for whatever reason, my parents liked to make it a 2-day trip down there, so we would stop at some midway point each time. And one year, we stopped in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. And I'll never forget that name because when we got there, we got our motel, and we ate dinner, and we came back to the motel. And the way this motel was set up, it was like in a line of rooms, and all the rooms faced out towards this courtyard. Not even a courtyard. It was like a big, giant, square lawn. And our motel room was at the end of this line of rooms. And to the right of our room and to the right of this lawn, coming out perpendicular from the motel, was this row of hedges. And on the other side of the hedges was this little hill, or I guess ridge, about 10 or 15 feet high. It also had grass on it. So at that point, it was a warm summer night in Kentucky, and my dad was sitting out in front of the room having a smoke, and I was out there, I guess, burning off some energy from the road trip. So I was running around in this lawn, and I was making a game out of trying to clear this row of hedges, and it was probably about 3 or 4 feet high. So high enough that I could jump over it, but I was trying to get my whole body over it without touching the hedges. I was trying to figure out different ways to do this, different angles to jump from, different speeds. And the goal was to jump over the hedges and land in the grass and do a little roll. So at one point I walked up this hill or this ridge, and at the top of this hill was a tree line and some woods. So I went up this hill to try to see if I could get enough speed to jump over these hedges at the bottom of the hill. It didn't really work, so I figured, okay, I need more of a running start. So the next time I went up there, I actually started walking past the tree line into these woods, and the weird thing happened. It went from being warm and muggy to all of a sudden I felt cold, and it was super dark in there. I felt like I couldn't even see my hand in front of my face if I put it there. It was just all of a sudden I went from being in the real world to this like almost just cold, dark place. And I also had this feeling in my subconscious, in my core, of you do not belong here. You need to leave. So I was relieved in that as soon as I turned around, I could see the world that I had just come from. I could see the lights, I could see the motel, I could see my dad down there smoking. So I ran out of these woods, I ran down the hill, I took one more jump over the hedges, and then I told my dad, okay, yeah, I'm done for the night. And I went in and went to bed. The next morning when I woke up, the weather was kind of cold and gray and damp and foggy anyways, but before we left and hit the road, I decided I wanted to go back into those woods one more time and either confirm or prove wrong what I felt the night before. Because the night before, it scared me, and I felt like there was something weird about these woods. So the next day, I was like, let me go back into those woods and let me see. Did I have a reason to be scared, or were they just normal woods? So I'm walking in these woods, and thankfully now it's light out and I can see. And as I'm walking through these woods, I could see stuff that seems like it doesn't belong. And I couldn't figure it out, but I had to walk closer and take a closer look. And as I got closer, I could see that these objects that I thought didn't belong were gravestones or headstones. And I could only tell that because I recognized that they were stones and they were shaped. And as I looked closely, I could see they had names and dates on them. But some of them were so old that I could barely even tell that they had lettering on them. And the dates that I could see were very old. I want to say they were like 1800s, maybe even 1700s dates. They were like incomprehensibly old. So at that moment, I realized I was in a cemetery, which also was weird because I had only ever seen cemeteries that were big, open, grassy fields. I had never seen headstones just in a woods interspersed between trees. It was weird to me. So at that point, I told myself, my conscious mind told myself, okay, this is a cemetery. I don't have any business being in this cemetery, so I should leave. So I left, and I went back, and I got in the car with my parents. I didn't tell them what happened, but in my mind, that actually confirmed what I had felt the night before, that there was something up with those woods. And I made sure to make a note in my head, Elizabethtown, Kentucky. Next time we're on a road trip down to Florida, I'm going to tell my parents, okay, if we have to stop, let's stop anywhere but Elizabethtown, Kentucky, because there's probably some spirits out there looking for me.
Thanks to everyone who shared their spooky stories, and to you for listening. If you had your own strange encounter or a theory about what might really be happening, tell us.
Maybe it's the memories. Maybe it's something spiritual. Whatever it is, these stories remind us that sometimes the veil between the world is thinner than we think.